Hey everybody, welcome to Day 5 of the Dominaria set review on the Mana Leek. I'm John. As always, Day 5 means it's the last of the mono-colored reviews. We've got all of the green cards today. Tomorrow we'll put all of the multicolored artifact and land cards in one, so it might be a little bit longer because that's a lot more cards than these monocolored ones have been, but a lot of them are also pretty quick to talk about. So anyways, let's jump on into the green set review. Up first, we have Adventurous Impulse. Adventurous Impulse is a single green mana for a sorcery at common. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and then put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Yeah, not a huge fan of this. It's very 23rd cardish. It will almost always replace itself. It makes sketchy keeps a little bit better so that you can hopefully go find that land. I will say though 3 cards is a little bit rough on ensuring that you get what you're really looking for, because let's face it, whenever you're casting a card like this, like Commune with the Dinosaurs or whatever, you're typically casting it because you want a creature or because you want a land. It's never, well, it's not never, but it's rarely that you're kind of happy about either option. So the 3 cards is not the best. Ultimately, this is a really late pick, and I think you do cut it if you just have better cards. So I've got Adventurous Impulse at a C. It might even be a little bit more like a C-. Up next is Ancient Animus. Ancient Animus is 1 and a green for an instant at common. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control if it's legendary. Then it fights target creature an opponent controls. It's Pounce, which is fine. Pounce was always just kind of okay. The only downside on Pounce was that it didn't play well in Merfolk, but it played amazing in Dinosaurs. In this format, I think it's going to be better than Pounce was, kind of above average, or on average anyways. It's still not amazing because it is a fight spell. The +1/+1 counter, if it's on a legendary, that's pretty cool. So I do think this card is going to be first pick in significantly weak packs, but it does have that same problem that fight spells usually have. But being at instant speed, I'm not going to go any lower than B- for Ancient Animus. Up next is Arbor Armament, another fun card to say several times in a row. Arbor Armament is a single green mana for an instant at common. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That creature gains reach until end of turn. It's a fine combat trick. Keeping the buff is very nice. That's of course something that we love to see on a combat trick, but this is about as low impact as you can possibly get. You side it in 100% of the time when you're against flyers, but I don't think you always just main deck this automatically. I think it's kind of a solid C that you will cut if you just don't have a spot for it. So C for Arbor Armament. Up next is Baloth Gorger. Baloth Gorger is 2 green for a creature beast at common. It's a 4/4. It's got Kicker for generic mana. If Baloth Gorger was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. This is a 4 mana 4/4 at common that can be a 7/7 for 8. This is just good. This is just totally, utterly good. I think you probably just play this 100% of the time. It's not a high pick. It is just a vanilla creature. There's no evasion. There's no trample. There's nothing else going on other than big stats for what you're paying for. So I do think it's a C+ at best, but I think it is a very, very, very good C+. You'll pick this up relatively high mid-pack and feel pretty good about it. Always play that card. Up next is Broken Bond. Broken Bond is 1 and a green for a sorcery at common. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. It's pure sideboard. It's pure sideboard. The fact that it's not instant speed is definite downside. And getting a land on the battlefield, if you have one, is fine. I don't think I would trade instant speed for that, to be honest. But anyways, this is just a pure D. You do not ever main deck this card. Up next is Corrosive Ooze. Corrosive Ooze is 1 and a green for a creature ooze at common. It's a 2/2. Whenever Corrosive Ooze blocks or becomes blocked by an equipped creature, destroy all equipment attached to that creature at the end of combat. It's a bear with an upside, so that kind of makes it a C+, but I think the upside is extremely narrow. As you'll see tomorrow, the equipment is the usual, meaning it's not the best. You'll play it, you'll be okay playing this because it's 2/2 for 2, so it's not the worst. So I will keep it at a C+ still, but the upside is very narrow. So C+ for Corrosive Ooze. Up next is Elfheim Druid. Elfheim Druid is 1 and a green for a 0/2 creature elf druid at uncommon. Tap, add a green. Tap, add 2 green. Why would you ever choose the first one? Well, because the second one, adding 2 green, can only be used if you're casting a kicked spell. This is a mana dork. It's a 2-drop mana dork, which of course is a lot worse than a 1-drop. but they're still really good, and they're in fact still really high picks. And in the weakest of packs, I have picked a 2-drop Mana Dork before and have been totally okay with it. Being able to ramp could be absolutely key in this format because there are some big beefy things and there are some big beefy kicked things as well, which this significantly helps out. So I really like Elfhame Druid. I think it is a relatively strong first pick in a weak pack. So I've got this at a B-. I love Mana Dorks. I love formats that have Mana Dorks, and this one has 2. Up next is Fungal Plots. Fungal Plots is 1 and a green for an enchantment at uncommon. Pay 1 and a green and also exile a creature card from your graveyard. Create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. Sacrifice 2 Saprolings, you gain 2 life, and you draw a card. It's a cool little value engine, but it does require there to be creatures in your graveyard. So they have to get there somehow, which means you need to be killing creatures a lot. And if you are deep into the Saprolings deck, meaning you're creating a whole bunch of tokens, you're not going to necessarily have creatures in your graveyard because they're tokens, a lot of your creatures, and they're going to just disappear into the vapor. Obviously, this is a massive build around. If you can get those 3/2s that leave a Saproling behind, if you can get the Saproling tokens, if you can get yourself a Slimefoot, this thing can do some work, assuming that you're allowed to dirtle around for a lot. So this is a card that really defies grade. I've got it at like a D+. I think if the stars align and you get all the right cards, you can definitely play this and it's going to just generate you a ton of value. But there's going to be a massive number of decks where you just shouldn't play this. In fact, I would say you never ever play this in any deck other than a black-green Saproling deck that has all of the right stuff. So we'll keep it at a D+, but it's really valuable in a single deck, basically. Up next is Gaia's Blessing. Gaia's Blessing is 1 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyard into their library. Draw a card. When Gaia's Blessing is put into your graveyard from your library, shuffle your graveyard into your library. There's no point to this. Putting 3 cards into your library randomly so you maybe draw them is not ever going to be worth a card, even if it does replace itself by drawing. I have no interest in playing this card. I've got it in F. Just nope. Not for me. F for Gaia's Blessing. Up next is Gaia's Protector. Gaia's Protector is 3 and a green for a creature elemental warrior at common. It's a 4/2. Gaia's Protector must be blocked if able. Not a big fan of this either. I don't like 4-mana 4/2s usually. They're going to trade down with 2/2s. With 2-drops. Some 1-drops will kill this. Some very weak removal kills this. And the must be blocked isn't even a lure. They can just chump block it with a 1/1, and the rest of their team can do whatever they feel like. So I'm pretty out on Gaia's Protector. I've got it at a D+. I think things have gone kind of poorly if you have to play this in your deck. Up next is Gift of Growth. Gift of Growth is 1 and a green for an instant at common. It's got Kicker for 2 generic mana. Untap target creature. It gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If it was kicked, it gets +4/+4 until end of turn. This is just a solid combat trick. +2/+2 for 2 mana isn't that great, but untapping is real nice. That surprises everybody all the time, even when they are deep into this format and know this card. They still get blown out by it. And if it's a little bit later in the game, +4/+4 probably means you just always win that combat. I like this combat trick quite a bit. I've got it at like a C+. It's a low C+ because it is still just a combat trick, but I think you do play this whenever you can. I don't think you side it out unless you have significantly better cards. So C+ for Gift of Growth. Still a low pick, though. Up next is Grow from the Ashes. Grow from the Ashes is 2 and a green for a sorcery at common. It's got Kicker for 2 generic mana. Search your library for a basic land card. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. If this spell was kicked, instead search your library for 2 basic land cards. Put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Note that there is 0 mention of the word tapped here. You pay 3 mana, you go get a land, you put it on the battlefield, it's untapped. You can then cast a Llanowar Elves, for example, or whatever. I think this is actually a really fine ramp spell. It's 3 mana. I prefer my ramp spells to be 2, of course, but the untapped clause is really, really, really good. And, being able to cast it for 5 and getting a couple of lands is also really good. Great ramp spell. Fantastic splashing spell. I don't think I would ever play it in a 2-color deck if I wasn't a ramp deck. If I wasn't playing a bunch of kicker cards, if I wasn't playing Verdant Force or something like that, I don't think I'd play this card ever. But if I'm trying to get to big stuff, if I'm splashing a third color or a fourth color or a fifth color, this card is going to be fantastic. So it's kind of like a D++. It's real good in a couple of decks. So make sure you're in those decks. Take this after you're in those decks because nobody else is going to want this card. Nobody else should want this card. And don't play this in your 2-color green deck that's not trying to go late game or get rampy. So D++ for Grow from the Ashes. Up next is Grunn, the Lonely King. Grunn is 4 green for a legendary creature Ape Warrior at uncommon. It's a 5/5, kicker, 3 generic mana. If Grunn, the Lonely King was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever Grunn attacks alone, double its power and toughness until end of turn. So you've got yourself a 5/5 for 6 that if it attacks by itself is a 10/10. It's pretty scary, but there's no trample or anything. If you kicked this, so if you cast it for 7 green, which is asking an awful lot, you've got a 20/20 when it attacks by itself. Those are all very good numbers. Very good numbers that I think would make me play this pretty regularly. I don't think I'm ever hanging on to this on turn 6, waiting for turn 9. I think I'm just dropping it as a 5/5. And if I'm in the situation where I have 9 mana and I draw this, cool, awesome. It still does just get chump blocked forever. So I'm not going to go any higher than a B- on this, but I think it is a solid B- for Grunn, the Lonely King. Up next is Kamal's Druidic Vow. Kamal's Druidic Vow is X green for a legendary sorcery at rare. Look at the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of land and or legendary permanent cards with CMC X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest into your graveyard. This card's bad. This card's really bad. You need to have a ludicrous number of legendaries in your deck in order to play this. Like I'm talking 7, 8, 9, 10 legendary cards in your deck in order to want to play this. Getting the lands doesn't remotely matter to me. Like if I'm casting this for 5 or 6, which means I'm casting it for CMC 6 or 7 mana, 7 or 8 mana, why do I need more lands? And if I'm hitting a legendary maybe, what do I care? This just feels too random. It feels like the deck that needs it is just never going to exist. So I think Kamal's Druidic Vow is just a straight F. Up next is Krosan Druid. Krosan Druid is 2 and a green for a creature Centaur Druid at common. It's a 2/3. It's got kicker for 4 and a green. So nearly double its cost. When Krosan Druid enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you gain 10 life. It's a lot of life. It still doesn't make this card good. It's a 2/3 for 3, which, it's fine. It's like a C- filler card. And if I really get late game and I can spend all this mana, I gain 10 life, which is not an inconsequential amount of life, but it is just 10 life. It's nothing else going on here. So I think it's a very cuttable card. I think it's a C-. If you're kicking it real early, like turn 5 or 6, I think it goes up to a strong C-, but still a C- nonetheless. So Krosan Druid, C-. Up next is Llanowar Elves. Llanowar Elves from Alpha. We never thought we'd see them ever again. Single green mana for a creature elf druid at common. It's a 1/1. Tap it to add green. Llanowar Elves are great. I'll pick them very highly, and I would first pick them in weak packs. Starting out with an elf on 1 is just such a big game. That is so huge that a lot of people sometimes can't come back from it. And if you get a second one, that is game over. They're only bad in your deck on like turn 6 or plus once you've hit all the lands you need. But even then you can start double spelling. So it's just super good. B- for Llanowar Elves. Very happy to see them back. Up next is Llanowar Envoy. Llanowar Envoy is 2 and a green for a creature elf scout at common. It's a 3/2. Pay 1 and a green. Add 1 mana of any color. I'm not as happy with Llanowar Envoy. It is a 3/2 for 3, so it is a creature that at least can, kind of be a combat-y creature, but I need to be splashing something amazing to play an Unknown Shores, for example, and this is basically just a creature version of Unknown Shores. You're paying 2 mana. One of them has to be green as well, so it's a little bit less, or a little bit more restrictive than Unknown Shores in order to actually get that other mana. So this feels worse. It feels vulnerable, like a vulnerable version of Unknown Shores. So I've got it at a C-. I think it's just a creature that you cut, and there's better ways of splashing. So C- for Llanowar Envoy. Our final Llanowar creature is Llanowar Scout. Llanowar Scout is 1 and a green for a creature elf scout at common. It's a 1/3, so it's one of these 1/3s for 2. You can tap it to put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. This actually seems kind of cool. It blocks really well from turn 2 to 5, and on your opponent's turn, after it's blocked or whatever, even after it's chump blocked and just before it dies, tap it, throw a land on the battlefield, ramp yourself. Now, obviously, you have to have that land in your hand. That's the big downside of cheating lands out of your hand, is you have to have them. So it is ramp, but it is a bit more conditional ramp than ramp usually is, but it still seems fine, and I think I am going to play it relatively highly until I learn differently. So it's obviously nowhere near a Llanowar Elves or anything, but I am going to put it at a C+, a relatively weak C+, but a C+ nonetheless. I'm going to start out playing these. If they're bad, we'll find out pretty quickly, I think. Up next is Mammoth Spider. Mammoth Spider is 4 and a green for a creature spider at common. It's a 3/5 with reach. It is a giant spider, except everything else is +1. +1 mana cost, +1 power, +1 toughness, which I think I would have just preferred giant spider. I don't think the extra power and toughness is really cool enough to make this a 5-drop. So it probably just sits in your sideboard in the majority of decks. I think it's a C- at best. But remember, when you have it, when you're seeing flyers, remember you have it in the sideboard, because it will be a fine enough include. Up next is Marwyn, the Nurturer. Marwyn is 2 and a green for legendary creature elf druid at rare. She's a 1/1. Whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Marwyn, the Nurturer. Now, unfortunately, like the goblins in red, there's not that many elves in this set. Luckily, the ones that are here are kind of okay. You know, you've got Llanowar Druid or Llanowar Elves, you've got Llanowar Scout, which I'm starting out okay on, you've got Elfham Druid, which I'm totally okay on, and there's one more elf that we'll see that is dumb, but yeah, I don't think there's quite enough to really go super deep on Marwyn, so I think Marwyn's going to be a 2/2 frequently. Just a 2/2. But that being said, she is a 3-mana mana dork, and I think I still just play a 3-mana mana dork. And then if I can get some counters on her somehow, either by playing a Llanowar Elf or playing an Arbor Armament on her or something, being able to get a couple of mana, 3 mana, that's going to be some nice ramp as well. Ultimately, I don't think I'm going to go any higher than a B- on her, because you're not just going to flood her with counters. There's not that many elves. But I'm going to start with a B-. I don't think she's a first pick ever. I think she's just kind of a high early to high mid-pack pick, but I am going to start Marwyn out at a B-. Up next is the Mending of Dominaria. The Mending of Dominaria is 3 green for an enchantment saga at rare. Act 1 and 2, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then, you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Act 3, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, then shuffle your graveyard into your library. Not a big fan of this. This is like the slowest, most random ramp spell ever. Like 5 mana, and you get to mill yourself, and you get a couple of creatures back if the mill went well. And then, if you, again, had those 2 mills go well, you get some number of lands back, maybe? I don't know. I don't think this is worth enough. I don't think you want ramp by the time Act 3 comes along. I'm just totally out on the Great Mending. I don't think it's worth the mana cost. If it was like 2 mana, I'd probably just be all over this, but at 5 mana, I'm pretty darn out. So I'm at a D- on the Mending of Dominaria. I just don't think it's any good. Up next is Multani, Yavamaya's avatar. Multani is 4 green for legendary creature elemental avatar at Mythic. It's a 0/0, so that's pretty bad. It's got reach and trample. Multani, Yavamaya's avatar, gets +1/+1 for each land you control and each land card in your graveyard. Pay 1 and a green, return 2 lands you control to the owner's hand. Return Multani from your graveyard to your hand. So it's a 6 mana 6/6 if you hardcast it. If you got some elves to help you out, it's probably a 5/5, maybe a 4/4. But that's still pretty darn good, because if it's a 4/4, it's still probably a 4/4 on turn 5 or 4. And then on turn 6, it's probably just a 6/6, assuming you hit your land drops. So that's pretty darn good. It's got trample, which is fantastic. It's got reach, which is great. And if it dies, it just comes back. You've got to return 2 lands to your hand, but It's not that big of a deal. You just play another one, and you know the other one can come down next turn. So this is going to be really hard to kill. It's going to demand exile effects to kill it off. Yeah, Multani looks fantastic. It's a snap first pick. Solid, solid, solid A. Solid A for Multani, Yavimai's avatar. Up next is Nature's Spiral. Nature's Spiral is 1 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. I don't like playing this in black. I certainly don't like playing it in green. It's sorcery speed. Sure, it will let you get back auras and sagas and artifacts, but no, this card is just not what I want. I'm pretty out on it. I've got it at a D+ as well, just like Salvage Soul. So D+ for Nature's Spiral. Up next is Pierce the Sky. Pierce the Sky is 1 and a green for an instant at common. Pierce the Sky deals 7 damage to target creature with flying, also known as probably hopefully destroys target creature with flying. It's a D+. It's just a sideboard card. You never, ever, 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 ever should play this card in the main deck. And the second you see any sort of flyer that's, you know, more scary than a 1/1 or maybe a 2/2, you throw this in. D+ for Pierce the Sky. Up next is Primordial Worm. Primordial Worm is 4 green for a creature worm at common. It's a 7/6, and that's it. It's got no trample, so I'm pretty out. It's just a very cuttable C-. I would love to have seen Colossal Dreadmaw for the 4th set in a row, to be honest. This is nowhere near a Colossal Dreadmaw. It's a C-. You cut it really, really, really readily. So C- for Primordial Worm. Up next is Saproling Migration. Saproling Migration is 1 and a green for a sorcery at common. Kicker for 4 generic mana. Create 2 1/1 green Saproling creature tokens. If this spell was kicked, create 4 of those tokens instead. So you get a 2/2 for 2. It's a bear. Or for 6 mana, you get 4/4 spread across 4 bodies, which is all fine. I do think that you want to be taking advantage of this, though. I think you want the fungal plots. You want something to do with these saprolings. You want to make them bigger. You want to sack them. You want to do something other than just have 4 1/1s for 6. But as long as you do, it's a totally fine card. I think it's kind of a C in most decks, and in the deck that really utilizes it, I don't think it goes too much higher. Still kind of a C+. You do leave this for the kind of the backish half of the pack. Pretty high in the back half of the pack, though. So C+ for Saproling Migration. Up next is Song of Freyalise. Song of Freyalise is 1 and a green for an enchantment saga at uncommon. Act 1 and 2. Until your next turn, creatures you control gain, tap, add 1 mana of any color. They become Birds of Paradise. Act 3, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible until end of turn. Song of Freyalise looks decent, and I think the first 2 stages of this could be pretty darn crazy. If you've got, you know, let's say a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and you play this on turn 4, you then still have your 4 mana available, even though you just cast this 2-drop. Next turn, you're going to look at 6, 7 mana, and then you're flooding counters on the board. I don't think any part of this is insane, but I think it all is all just kind of good. I've got this at a B-. I think you do play this. It needs to go in specific decks. You need to have low drops. You need to be a ramp deck already anyways, and this will just help you ramp out a whole lot better. Works pretty well with Saprolings, getting 1 +1/+1 counters on all those little Saprolings, etc. I think the real trick is going to be trying to figure out when you play this. I don't think you ever play this on turn 2. I think it works a little bit better as like a turn 4, turn 5 kind of play. I'm excited to give it a go because I think it is a card that could wildly swing in either direction of being good or bad, but I'm going to start at a B- for Song of Freyalise. Up next is Spore Swarm. Spore Swarm is 3 and a green for an instant at uncommon. Create 3 1/1 green Saproling creature tokens. Well, this is better than Saproling Migration. 3 1/1s for 4 at instant speed. It's just really, really good. It's a 3/3 with flash for 4, which will kill creatures and maybe even leave behind a Saproling or so. It creates 3 turns of chump blockers. It creates Saprolings for the Saproling deck. There's just a lot of versatility here. It's a really decent card that I think you do pick relatively high mid-pack. It's a very, very high C+. I can't go to a B- for 3 1/1s, but it is a very high C+ for Spore Swarm. Up next is Spore Crown Thallid. Spore Crown Thallid is 1 and a green for a creature fungus at uncommon. It's 2/2. Each other creature you control that's a fungus or a saproling gets +1/+1. This is a saproling lord. It's not legendary, which means you can have multiples. It is an uncommon, which means on average there's only going to be one every draft, but of course that's average. There will be drafts that have 2 or 3 of these. Yeah, this is great. I think you do pick this relatively highly. I think you grab every Spore Swarm and every Saproling migration and everything that you can get your hands on, and you go deep on this. So I think it's a B-. I think it's real good. You obviously have to build around it. You have to ditch it if you don't end up with the Saprolings that you need. But yeah, B- for Spore Crown Thallid. Up next is our last elf, Steel Leaf Champion. Steel Leaf Champion is green for a creature elf knight at rare. It's a 5/4. Steel Leaf Champion can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. I've seen people say this is the best of the 3-colored cycle, and I don't agree. I think it's actually 3rd best, possibly even 4th best. Of course, in Magical Christmas Land, you play a forest, you play an Llanowar elf. On turn 2, you play a 5/4. That probably can't be blocked for several turns, and you deal 15 damage. And yeah, it's gonna suck when that happens. But it has to happen. And it's not going to happen all the time. These triple card spells are actually going to be relatively hard to cast. So some odds on this, it's actually less than 50% for you to have 3 lands of the same color if you're playing 10 of those lands. So if you're playing 10 forests and 7 islands or whatever, it's less than 50% that you're going to have 3 forests on turn 3. That's not the best odds. That's less than a coin flip. At 11/6, it still only goes up to like 56% chance of having it. And 11/6 is really starting to push that split. So you need to build a very heavy green deck if you want this to come down early. Now, it is still a 5/4. It is still totally fine on turn 5, 6, 7, whatever. But it's more likely your opponent is going to have a couple of 3-power creatures, or even just a single 4-power creature. So Steel Leaf Champion, I think, is fine. I think it is totally solid. I think it's going to be one of the worst feelings on turn 3 ever. Or sorry, turn 2. Turn 3, it's going to suck as well. But I don't think it's going to happen nearly as often as people are thinking. So I've got Steel Leaf Champion at a B-. I don't think you pick it over Premium Removal. I don't think it is a bomb per se, but I think it is very good. So B- for Steel Leaf Champion. Up next is Sylvan Awakening. Sylvan Awakening is 2 and a green for a sorcery at rare. Until your next turn, all lands you control become 2/2 elemental creatures with reach, indestructible, and haste. They're still lands. I don't know. It's definitely interesting. It can just end the game. If you're like 6 or 7 lands suddenly become 2/2s and you now have 12 or 14 damage that your opponent wasn't expecting, but I worry about its average case use. It does nothing at all early. It does nothing at all when you're behind. Yeah. I don't know. This isn't the kind of thing that I like to do. I don't like to gamble with my lands very much. So ultimately, I think this is a pretty late pick, and I think it just doesn't work in a lot of decks. So I'm going to put Sylvan Awakening at a D+. 100% I will lose to it when my opponent has 10 forests out and suddenly I'm being attacked for 20 that I didn't expect. But I don't think it's going to happen too often, so D+ for Sylvan Awakening. Up next is Territorial Allosaurus. Territorial Allosaurus is 2 green for a creature dinosaur at rare. It's a 5/5. It's got kicker for only 2 and a green. When Territorial Allosaurus enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it fights another creature. So we've got a 5/5 for 4. Super high pick right there. 100% playable. It's like a B-, maybe even a B for a 4-mana 5/5. Now, if you get to hit 7 mana, 3 of it being green, getting to fight a creature with your 5/5, and note that it is another creature. It doesn't actually say another creature you don't control, so I don't think you're ever going to be fighting your own creature, but you actually could, which we don't really usually see. All in all, this is good. I don't think it's exactly a straight A+, but I think it is a solid A. It's a snap first pick. You'll never not pick this pack one, pick one. So A for Territorial Allosaurus. Up next is Thorn Elemental. Thorn Elemental is 5 green for a creature elemental at uncommon. It's a 7/7. You may have Thorn Elemental assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. So you attack in, your opponent chump blocks. You say, okay, your creature doesn't die. You take 7 though. It's got trample and it pretends the creature just didn't block it. That's a really big game. It's basically unblockable. It can just end games, and your opponent does have to probably at least double, if not triple block to kill this thing a lot of the times. It is 7 mana, So that is slightly difficult, but you're in green. You've got all the ramp ability you can get your hands on. So I think Thorn Elemental is really good. I've got it at a B-. I think it's a pretty high pick, and I think you are very happy playing it and including it as often as you can. The only time you don't is if you somehow did not get a Llanowar Druid, a Llanowar Elf, or an Elfhame Druid, or a Grow from the Ashes or whatever, and you have no ramp and 7 mana, you just have to draw. That's the only place where I don't think you play this. So B- for Thorn Elemental. Up next is Untamed Kavu. Untamed Kavu is 1 and a green for a creature Kavu at uncommon. It's a 2/2. It's got Kicker for 3 generic mana. Vigilance, Trample. If Untamed Kavu was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. So again, Bear with upside. It's a 2/2 for 2 with Vigilance and Trample. And then if you play it for 5 mana, it's a 5/5 with Vigilance, Trample. So it just utterly smashes the vanilla tests on both sides. That's just nuts. This card is super, super, super good. Grizzly Bears are dead. They are dead and gone. RIP Grizzly Bears for, I guess, good until we get a power down of our French vanilla creatures. This card's just really good. I think it's a very strong, very high pick. I've got it at a B-. This should pull you into green a little bit and should never, ever, ever not make your deck. B- for Untamed Kavu. Up next is Verdant Force. Verdant Force is 5 green for a creature elemental at rare. It's a 7/7. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. So everybody just got to play with Tendershoot Dryad in Rivals of Ixalan, and this card is probably just worse. It is infinitely harder to cast, and it doesn't give your Saprolings +2/+2. But in exchange, it is a 7/7, so it is still a fantastic card. It is still a very high pick. Probably a first pick in a lot of packs. But unlike Tendershoot Dryad, you must be a green deck. Like I'm talking at least 10 forests, if not more. And you really, definitely, like 99% must be a ramp deck. You need to be getting this not out on turn 8. Because guess what? You're not just hard casting this on turn 8. Just always hitting your 8 land drops is not something you should ever count on. You need your elves, you need your druids, you need your ramp. If you've got that, this card's insane. This card is super, super, super good. So I've got it at like, I think a B+. No higher, just because that casting cost is a hard thing to pull off. So B+ for Verdant Force. There are absolutely green decks where you shouldn't play this. Those are the ones where you missed out on the ramp, etc. But as long as you can get there, B+ for Verdant Force. Up next is Wild Onslaught. Wild Onslaught is 3 and a green for an instant at uncommon. Kicker for 4 generic mana. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. If this spell was kicked, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control instead. We just had Strength of the Pack in Rivals of Ixalan, and it was not very good. I'm not a fan of paying this much mana for a spell that is only good if I already have a fantastic board presence. Because if I have a fantastic board presence, I should be winning. The only place this is good is when you're in a board stall. If you're ahead, you're winning anyways. If you're behind, doesn't do anything for you. Beginning of the game, doesn't do anything for you. So I think this card reads infinitely better than it actually will play out. I think it's going to be very, very, very similar to Strength of the Pack. I've got this at a C-, and realistically, I just don't think I play it. So C- for Wild Onslaught. Our final card for today is Yavimaya Shepherd. Yavimaya Sapherd. Every single person ever is going to call that Shepherd. Yavimaya Sapherd is 2 and a green for a creature fungus at common. It's a 2/2. When Yavimaya Sapherd enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. It is Drungaborn Pioneer from Rivals of Ixalan. It's a 2/2 that makes a little buddy. The little buddy doesn't have hexproof like the Pioneer did, but it's a Saproling, which is relevant in this format, as is fungus. This is just a solid card. It's a 3 mana 2/2 that makes a 1/1, so it's a 3 mana 3/3. That is super solid by itself. It's an easy C+ by itself. And if you happen to be in Saprolings, Fungus, Go Wide, etc., then it's going to bump up even to a B-. So C+ for Yavimaya Sapherd. So that's going to wrap it up for all of the green cards. Tomorrow we're going to go over the rest, the artifacts, the gold cards, the land cards. Let me know what you're excited about in green. Green looks really good. There's not as many ludicrous cards. You know, there's no Lyra Dawnbringer, there's no Demon Lord Bells and Lock, but there's Multani, and there's Territorial Allosaurus, and Verdant Force if you can get there, and just ramping like crazy and dropping multiple untamed Kavus or something like that is going to be a really big game. So pretty excited to go into green. I'm kind of hoping that's what I lean towards at one of my pre-releases. We'll see what I open. But yeah, let me know what you thought of this. Let me know what you agree with, disagree with, etc. in the comments down below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at the Mana Leek. That's Leek, like the vegetable, not the card. You can find me at facebook.com/ShamanaLeek, twitch.tv/ShamanaLeek, and patreon.com/ShamanaLeek. If you like the content, click that thumbs up button, click subscribe if you want to see more. And if you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see y'all tomorrow for the final set review.